morning, friends. This is Nitin Sapre from Press Information Bureau, and I welcome you all to this press conference. Today we have with us director Niels Arden Oplev of the film Daniel, which is based on a true story of a Danish journalist. Secondly, we have Erik Pollumaa of DOP, who is a cinematographer, of the film Scandinavian Silence, which is a psychological drama about reunion of two characters. Then we have director of Rwanda, Mr. Riccardo Salvetti, the film is about the fastest genocide in the history of Rwanda. I will just, it is my privilege to introduce the guest. Niels Arden Oplev is born in 1961, Denmark. After the film studied at the Copenhagen University, Arden Oplev graduated in direction at the National Film School of Denmark in 1989. His feature film debut, Portland, 1996, was selected for the Berlinale, and We Shall Overcome, 2006, took home the Crystal Beer at the Berlin as well as 26 other international awards. Then we have Erik Pollumaa. I hope I Erik Pollumaa. Erik Pollumaa, born in Tusu, Estonia, graduated in the Baltic Film and Media School in 2012 within different worldwide workshops and master classes, working with several production companies as cinematographer. Then we have Riccardo Salvetti, who is 33 movie director and filmmaker. He graduated in film production and at Civica Scuola di Cinema, Luciano Visanti for cinema, television and news media in Milan. He live video portraying stories about the social issues. His main work are at the docu-function Gabani du Valtecompine. I hope. Sorry, apologies. So now I would request the guests to speak about themselves and their film, and then the floor will be open for the question answer. Please, you can. Niels, please.
Speak about myself?
Yeah.
All right. What should I say? Well, you already said the most. I think, I'm a Danish filmmaker. Currently, in the last 10 years, I've been living in Los Angeles, working a lot in America. I think my most known film is called The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, which is a Swedish film that I shot 10 years ago based on a very popular crime story that became an international hit. And from there, I went to America. I've done 2 feature films in America and started 6 television series, but I tend to go back to my own country, to Scandinavia, to also shoot something in my own language. And the Daniel story, based on a true story about this young man who got captured by ISIS in Syria, was simply too compelling for me not to go back and shoot. So the stuff you can shoot in Scandinavia and Europe is quite different from American film business. American film business is very commercial, very studio driven, and the directors does not hold the same artistic power as I can do back home. So there's a big difference in working the 2 places. That's pretty much it, I think. Thank you for mentioning my age. That was not so good. I try to make my kids believe that I'm 258 because I think that I stuff too much strange knowledge into this head and can't be done only in 58 years. And let me shut up now and somebody else talk.
Mr. Riccardo, please.
Hello, everybody. Rwanda is my first feature fiction film. Before it, I realized only short movie and documentaries. And why a movie that spoke about Rwanda for an Italian director? In Europe, in this time, the situation is always strange because a lot of African people try to reach Europe, but all the European people are not interested in what happened in Africa. And so I tried with this movie to show a story that is not so known in Europe. And before becoming a movie, Rwanda was a theater show written by Marco Cortese and Mara Moschini, that are two author and actor in Italy, and they had more than 500 plays of this theater show that put in scene the real story of two Rwandan survivors at the genocide. And when they asked me to realize the movie version of the story, I decided to keep the theater show and Mara and Marco as lead actor for the reason that I said before. Put two white Italian actors in an African story, for me, was the better way to try to remove every difference, to try to remove barriers. And so I tried to turn an African story in a world human being story with two Italian guys that dressed the clothes of African survivors during the genocide.
Mr. Erik, please.
Hi, I'm Erik Pollumaa, cinematographer of Scandinavian Silence. The film is the second feature by the same director we worked on previous time. For us, it was quite complex to find the right images for the movie, since it's two characters in a car and driving in the winter, and to find the right angles to present the emotional state they were in. And otherwise, I've been lucky enough to work with different Estonian directors, mostly debut films, and mostly low-budget films. But yeah.
Thank you. And now the floor is open for the questions, please. Yeah, Erik, just speak on the microphone.
The subject that you chose, was it a lot of resistance to the subject that you chose for your film? The subject, was it difficult? Was there a lot of resistance around it while you're making it?
The subject is a true story, and Cécile and Augustin leave this story to Marco and Mara, that tried to tell the story during the theater show. But at the first time, they found a lot of resistance in the audience, for the reason that I mentioned before. And nobody was interested in an African story, in an African drama story, especially in Italy, where people prefer the comedy. And so it was very difficult to approach to this story and realize it, also for the story and for the location, because we are an independent production. Our budget was less than 100,000 euros, and so it was impossible go to Rwanda for shoot the movie, because the budget was not enough only for the plane. And so we had to find the location in Italy, and we were very lucky, because it is at 10 minutes from my home. In Forlì, a little town in the northeast of Italy, there is a natural reserve along along a river, and the picture of this place are really similar to Rwanda picture that a lot of African followers that follow us on the social media when they seen the pictures of the backstage, they thought that we were there, and they asked to them to come on the set. And when we answered we are in Italy, they didn't expect it that was so similar.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Sureshia from Online Media. And my question is to Niels, sir. You just told about European and US, LA movie making, where directors are given more chances and more freedom in Europe, which is not there in US. But when it comes to films, hits and perfection, US still holds it. So do you feel how long will it take for Europe to catch up with the US?
Oh, say the last part again.
How long will it take for Europe to catch up with US, like LA or Hollywood to come up?
Wow. I think that Indian filmmaking will catch up with US before Europe will. Because Europe, the filmmaking in Europe seems to, they kind of work in its own pace. And filmmaking in Europe is normally in the local small countries, so they get money from different fundings, and some of it is government money, like cultural support money. And then you apply for Euromarche, you get some money out of the European Union. But it's not like a lot. Most European films are shot on, fairly, small budgets or medium-sized budget compared to American films. So the European filmmaking is really more comparable to American independent filmmaking. Then you have like UK and France and Italy. They sometimes make bigger productions that may, like Luc Besson out of France, make productions that are the size of Europe or size of US. But I don't think Europe really can figure out. They're always complaining about the Americans taking all the tickets at the box office, but they're not very good at figuring out promoting bigger films that goes out in all. They don't like the, what you could say, the artsy snobbiness of European film don't acknowledge if you do a wide audience film for Europe. When we did The Girl with Dragon Tattoo out of Sweden that did $100 million in box office in Europe alone, it got absolutely no attention from the more artsy snobby side of the European films. So there's some kind of issue there. And America is so geared to the big Hollywood productions, but the streaming service is breaking it up. So actually a lot of American streaming services are moving into Europe to get the cheap production. So that is in some ways good, because it makes a lot of talent in Europe have the chance to do like a film for Netflix or HBO or Viaplay. But it also kind of has a tendency to raise the prices on the local filmmaking, which actually makes it more difficult to do the small artistic film in our own countries, meaning the small countries. Complex.
Niels, sir, thanks for telling that India is catching up faster than most of them. And how would you rate this China and Russia? They are also catching up. How do you feel movies from Russia?
I really don't know enough about Chinese filmmaking to how it's done production-wise. I do know one thing, that a lot of smaller independent producers and directors in Europe are looking towards the foreign film market in China, which is starting to come very strong, because there's a whole Chinese middle class that's interested in seeing films that are not only Chinese or American, and that actually, if you have a small film that you shot for $5 million and you get a hit in China with the Chinese middle class for a foreign film, then you're golden. So that market will become more important than getting a foreign film out in United States, which is traditional a very bad market for foreign films. So, but as far as production, I don't know. And Russian film production, I don't know much about. I'm a great fan of Andrei Tarkovsky, though, but I don't know much more about the Russian film production.
So, but European films are tying up with Africans, and last 2 years before, in film festivals, a lot of movies were seen. The Europeans making movies in Africa. And how is that trend, and is it really catching up?
How is what catching up?
The Europeans making films, co-production with African countries.
That might be. I'm not so knowledgeable about that. I do know that there's a very strong African filmmaking on its own, which has nothing to do with Europe, which is coming up in the African countries, and those films are starting to come to festivals and even to United States, which is a very cool thing, I think, because production, you can shoot a film for $100,000 or something less with the right equipment. So that kind of brings a new production freedom to filmmaking, which I think is being used really well in Africa. So it's kind of like a market that's constantly changing. But Europe will not catch up to America, ever.
Alfie, please.
This is Alfie for All India Radio. One question for Erik and then one for all of you. Erik, the question is, do you prefer a director who kind of gives you total freedom to express your creative view in cinematography, or someone who tells you exactly what he wants? And the question to all of you is, do you think that these Academy Awards and all are overrated, or are they a necessary evil?
I think I prefer the collaboration. It's always much more fulfilling to have the vision almost like doubled, so it's much more. And I think for awards, it's nice if people get recognized for their work, but I'm not sure about the Oscars things you were really asking.
Yeah, Niels,
sorry.
please. Mr. Niels.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. What am I answering? Well, I mean, the Oscar being overrated, that's a tough question. I mean, I think foreign films in America normally don't take up that much space. I can tell you that with The Girl with Drank Tattoos, Sweden did not send my film to the Oscars because they said it was too commercial. But then it still won the Critics' Choice Award, which is the American film critics, and it won the British BAFTA, which I'm very grateful for. But when we were at the Critics' Choice Award in Los Angeles, and I actually had prepared a speech, suddenly they just rushed through things because of television. And I was like, what the hell happened? I didn't even know if I won or not. I went to the men's room, and my daughter called me from New York. She was in the gym, and she saw that I won. So I was told in the men's room that I won the Critics' Choice Award, which I think was very appropriate for American film relation to foreign film. I mean, it's gotten better, I think, but there's always this talk about when the Americans show the Oscars or the Golden Globes, do they have time to show the Foreign Film Award? So it's really not something that is a major thing. I think it is important to win an Oscar to get sent, like say the film that India or Estonia, Denmark, Italy sends to the Oscars, is important to get distribution. Your chance of getting your film into the art house distribution in US, which is really only Landmark and those kind of theaters that shows foreign films, is much better if you have if you're the Oscars contender from your own country. So in that way, to get your film out in US, it means a lot. If you get nominated or win, it means a lot if you want to go work in Hollywood. So it is a necessary evil, I would say. It's probably also overrated, but you really can't get around that it is an important thing to try to participate in if you're a foreign filmmaker for US.
You guys talked about Hindi. You talked about watching Indian films. Have you watched any Indian films, or do you look up to some Indian film director?
Do I?
Yeah.
Or all of us?
Neil, first you. And the rest.
I have watched some Indian films throughout the time. I'm trying to remember the title of them, which I can't because I'm terrible with names. But I wouldn't say I know a lot about Indian filmmaking. I've been in contact with some Indian producers in America about doing stuff, but it hasn't mounted out to something. I would like to do a Bollywood film, though. That would be fun. That would be a little bit lighter than Daniel. More music and dancing and less terrorists beating up people.
I'm Runa Agarwal from All India Radio, and I have 3 questions. The first is to Riccardo. You said that Rwanda has been made off of a stage play, and I'd like to know how difficult it is to adapt from stage to film. That's one. Second is for Erik, which is that films from your part of the world, Eastern Europe, Estonia, we tend to associate with very bleak coloring. And the Indian landscape is the exact opposite. So for you, with your cinematographer's eye or your photography eye, when you come in to a place like ours, what strikes you in terms of light, color, things like that? And I'll come to the third question after these 2 are done. So.
I think that the screenplay experience of Rwanda has been one of the most difficult of my precedent experience of pre-production, because turn a theater show in a movie they are 2 different languages. So I wanted to keep a lot of things about the theater show, but I couldn't, because a movie is a movie. And so I tried to mix and looking for the just balanced. But I needed to work 5-6 months to reach the just mix of theater, cinema, and try to find the right way to put the 2 theater actors inside the fiction movie part of the movie. And it was difficult, but also stimulated, because I was always looking for something of new, and I love try to mix genres and languages, and I think it was one of the best experience of screenplay. Best, more difficult and more yeah in my life.
I think you can say that Eastern European films tend to be bleak, but maybe it's because of the themes also. They tend to be darker at some times, the more artsy film probably, but we also have comedies and
dark comedies. No.
But I think for India and the colors, it's totally different nature, and also the people. But for colors, it depends on the project or even the frame. It can like distract or keep your attention. So it's like a tool.
And my third question was to all of you. We are a country that consumes huge amounts of cinema. Not just, I know a lot of people talk Bollywood, but we've got a very vibrant regional cinema culture. And across all parts of India, regional cinema is consumed voraciously. Unfortunately, we only get to see international cinema outside of Hollywood when we come to festivals. Have you had any experience with trying to distribute in India to make it more accessible to film buffs to be able to see it in the mainstream? Any of you? And is that something that festivals like this facilitate, such that we as viewers would have access to seeing more international cinema, primarily European, because we get to see most of Hollywood stuff here anyway?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with it. I know that the film I made that won the Crystal Bear in Berlin was sold to Indian cinema. It's called We Shall Overcome in English. It's also called The Dream, which is about this boy in 1969 who sees Martin Luther King on television, and that gives him courage to start a revolution at his school against the violent headmaster. But I mean, that film has been shown all over the world, and it was shown here in India. I am actually not sure, but I think The Girl with Dragon Tattoo was shown here also. That being the originally Swedish one and not the American one. I hope. I mean, I'm sure the American one was shown here too. But yeah, I think it's always difficult to get foreign films out because the cost of getting them to the theaters is very risky for the local distributors. But I think that the streaming platforms are going to change that. So if you have a film and you sell it to Netflix or Amazon or HBO or something, then people basically all over the world is going to be able to watch it. So I do think the streaming platforms will totally change how we access films in the different countries.
What's usually the lead time between a film being released and it coming onto a streaming platform? Is there like
Well, I think that totally varies from country to country, because it really depends on when you obtain financing for a smaller European film. You kind of have sold off a lot of stuff like pay TV maybe in your local country. You maybe sold it to a local television station. You have distribution that has to make money off the video on demand first. And I actually have that issue with Daniel right now, that Netflix wants to buy it. They're mostly interested in, they're very interested in Scandinavia because the film is very strong in its own area. But the local distributor there, which is Nordisk Film, they have a VOD platform that they kind of want to fulfill first. So right now they're kind of like arguing. And I'm like, I want my film out because, you know, the film is very tough, and I could not get distribution in America because it's too violent for them, which is kind of ironic since American film are very violent. But there's a difference between violence and something that looks like real violence, I found out. So complicated, but I would say probably a year. I mean, the window is getting shorter and shorter. In the old days, it was like 2 years or something.
Suresh, and my question is to Erik and Riccardo. The question is on Netflix and Amazon Prime. Do you have any experience dealing with them, and how do you feel it, and what changes do you think that would bring into the media and to the film viewing?
I have not any experience about distribution on platform like Netflix or Amazon Prime, and the production of Rwanda is looking for a contact for Netflix, and we are in difficult because we don't know how. Probably today is easier realized a movie production need less money than 20 or 30 years ago, but for the distribution is always a little bit difficult. In Italy, for Rwanda, we self-distribute the movie. Every cinema or every association or people can go to the website rwandalfilm.it and everyone can ask to screening the movie. And through this way, we had a lot of screening in Italy with this wave of self-distribution. And we had a distribution through film festival, but we are still looking for a real distribution for the movie, for the cinema part of distribution, and also for the Netflix or streaming distribution.
Mr. Salvetti, Mahesh, did you mean you are arranging screenings based on the requests put on that website? So depending upon how much request is coming, you are arranging shows, screenings of it. That's what you are trying to say?
You are asking me how for the distribution.
You mentioned some website. Can you repeat that?
The website Rwanda Il Film. The spelling is RWANDAILFILM.it, and everyone can ask the movie for screen it. Yes, but this is easy way in Italy because we send the DCP in 2 days and come back. For the international distribution is not so easy, probably with the streaming link or something like this.
After logging into this website, movies is streamed or its show is arranged in theater?
People can ask through the website the authorization for the screening, and they send the DCP or give the habilitation to the link for screening directly in the theater.
So they will be sharing the link, you mean to say?
Yeah. With a temporary password. And this is the way that we try to use for distribute the movie ourselves.
Any question here? So thank you very much for making it to the PIB Media Center from the busy schedule. And by the way, I just wanted to whether you could catch up any of the Indian films in the festival. Oh,
that would be good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
for coming.